Hello everybody, what is going on, and welcome back to another episode of everyone's favorite Friday treat, Form Check Friday. Now in this series, we take your videos, we put them up on this screen, we give you a powerlifting critique. If you're interested in submitting, just check the description box below. There's going to be a link and some instructions if you follow that link. You follow the link. The length of the link. Follow it through to its entirety. Anyways, we're gonna start off with the lifter that we left off with last time.
Which is Helena Eklund, I think. Eklund?
Eklund, I think, is pretty close. I think you're doing a good job today, Joe.
She's a M2 lifter, been into powerlifting for 1.5 years. This is 40 kilos for 7 reps, RP 7 to 8. Previous best, I think, was 50 kilos in comp in 2022. She's been struggling with some shoulder impingement, finds that RP 9 to 10 is hard on bench. And what should she focus on?
So, honestly, I think here, the name was Helena?
Yep.
Helena. I think your bench actually looks pretty fantastic. One of the things I really like is kind of towards the end of the set here, like you're just barely hovering your butt. Now, the reason I like that is because that tells me we are using a lot of leg drive, right? The whole idea of leg drive on the bench is that we're gonna be using our feet to kind of press ourselves backwards. You've got this nice little arch here. You know, you can tell your glutes are contracted because you've got hip extension here. And you're bringing your chest up, you're shortening the range of motion. It's gonna keep your shoulders in a good position because you're just driving back this way. Now, yes, towards the end of the set, we probably don't wanna be like hovering around quite that much, especially not with the new, freshly more ambiguous IPF rules about the acceptable amount of the butt that needs to be on the bench. So throughout the set, it looked good though. You look like you're in a good position. So number one, I wanted to commend you on your leg drive. I think you're doing a good job of it throughout the set. Now, in terms of your actual technique, the only thing that I can maybe give you is to just tuck a little bit less, right? I think you can allow these elbows out a little bit. And anecdotally, you know, I've worked with enough lifters and I've found in my own lifting consistently enough that sometimes over tucking can be a little extra hard on the shoulders. And I think there's kind of some holdovers from way back in the day when I first got into powerlifting, when you know, multiply was kind of one of the more popular ways of lifting, where the universal cue for bench press, if you're a power lifter, you want to be tucking those shoulders or tucking those elbows. And I think what ends up happening is people sort of mistake. Now you can see this, I'm going to use this to illustrate my point. You can see right here as you come out of the rack, watch Helena's upper back tighten up, right? She pulls her shoulder blades down and kind of locks everything into this really nice position. Now, what a lot of people will do is they'll take that same tension, that same kind of external rotation of the shoulder, and they'll just keep going, because if some is good, more is better. And they end up really cranking the elbows in a little bit too far. So first things first, out of the rack, I would probably pull this bar out a little bit more so you're not quite so far back behind yourself. And the next thing I would do is, as you descend, just keep those elbows a little bit more flared, right? Right now they're really leading the bar. Have them lead the bar just a little bit. And it's gonna be a subtle change because I don't think you're wildly over tucking. You're able to press from a really strong position in the bottom. However, I do think that on some of these reps, more than others, we are slightly over tucking and maybe leading the bar a little too much with the elbows. So that would be my single recommendation. Other than that, like, your pauses look good, your presses in general look good, your shoulder position is maintained really well, and like I said, your leg drive is great. So yeah, that's my recommendation. I hope that helps.
So this next guy.
Uh-oh, that's a big sigh.
I've been practicing how to pronounce different, like, not practicing, I've been looking up how to pronounce names when they look hard.
Yeah. That would
no
be
idea
the professional
if
way
this
to
is
approach it.
going to be right, but it's probably closer.
Have you been practicing the specific names or just like general kind of?
I just like wrote down how I would say it phonetically from what I heard on Google. So
okay,
we'll see if I can get it right. I haven't practiced this, so now I'm rusty. I wrote this down the other day.
I thought you said you practiced it.
No, I just researched is what I meant to say.
Okay.
Yeah. So this comes from Kacper Milcharek. That's as good as it's going to get from me.
Sure. Yeah, that's pretty good.
So he's not training for a comp. This is 200 kilos, RPE 10. And he sent us, it was a slow-mo clip. So I sped one of them up to regular speed and I kept the slow-mo one in. That way you can kind of use both. He pulled 210 kilos 5 years ago at 80 kilos body weight, but started getting hip pain a year later, which feels worse with high volume. He's been trying to get a new PR for 5 years, and every time he tries 200 kilos, he fails.
Well, he got it this time though, right?
A less upright position feels better on his hip. Sumo has never worked. Feels that if he wasn't so shaky at the knees, he would be able to go for 210.
All right. So it's funny you mentioned that sumo hasn't worked for you, because one of the things I was going to say was maybe try sumo, right? You got a really long torso and maybe a little bit shorter femurs, and it does look like, potentially sumo would be a thing. So I would revisit that and just play around with it a little bit, right? Not saying that's going to fix or solve your problems, but leave yourself open to that. Mess around with it on an alternate day, and allow the lift to scale, right? I think the thing is, the mistake that a lot of people will make is they'll, switch to sumo, and you said 210's kind of your plateau mark, right? A lot of people will switch to sumo, they'll train it for 3 months, and they'll try to pull through 210, right? And they'll just be like, all right, we're just gonna lift as much as I would normally lift conventional right away, and if it doesn't work, then it didn't work. And it's probably gonna take a little bit more time than that. But looking at your actual conventional here, like, I think your pattern is pretty good. I wouldn't even say this is a high hipped position. Like, from where you start, it looks actually like you've dipped down pretty well. You got a relatively more upright or kind of like 45 degree, whatever. This looks like not a super high hipped conventional, is what I'm getting at there. So with the shaking thing, there can be a number of different reasons that happens past the hip, or past the knee, sorry. I think part of it is, number one, you can see you like pull your head back. So that tells me we're probably trying to do a lot of that sort of top extension with the back, as opposed to continuing to think about the hips and the knees, trying to get a little more out of the hips, hamstrings, glutes, hips, hamstrings, quads. So I think as you come past the knees, really continue to use that leg push and that lower body push, and try not to change your head orientation, right? Because ideally, we would want to keep that consistent, right? Because one of the big sort of fundamentals of bracing in any of these lower body lifts is that we want the upper body to be as rigid and consistently positioned as possible, right? Because the goal is that we're transferring force from the lower body through to the bar. So if there's any kind of leak of energy here, then the force isn't getting transferred from here to here. And shoulder blade is essentially where we're anchoring the bar in. So the other thing that I would maybe look at is check yourself out from the front. Now, one of the things that could be happening is maybe we're seeing a little bit too much sort of knee cave, right? We're seeing the knee angle come in a little bit. When the knee angle comes in a little bit, or if we're a little crowded, right? And what I mean by that is if your grip is narrow and your knees are having to like fit inside your grip because you're doing conventional, a lot of the times that ends up with the knees almost narrower than the width of your hips, which then makes it really hard for the hips to do their job, right? I guess depending on the structure of your hip, but still. One of the things that might help you out here is slightly widening the grip and allowing yourself to take a little bit of a wider sort of knee angle and or stance. The other thing I would mention, and this is going to be more of sort of a programming or even like a philosophical thing, is when we get to these plateaus, a lot of the times the impetus or the way that we feel we should act on it is to train that lift harder, push the intensity, bump up against that plateau more often. And I can tell you from experience, a lot of the times that is maybe one of the things holding you back. If you're continually trying that weight and failing it and being deterred, it might just be that you need to spend more time in that 75 to 85% range, get in some good training, hit some rep PRs, and slowly scale that over time, as opposed to kind of smacking into that wall of, okay, this is the PR, we got to try to take it, over and over and over again. So, from a programming or even like maybe a philosophical standpoint, that would be another thing that I would try to think about to address this. But yeah, also take a look from the front and see if we're maybe a little too narrow on things. Sometimes widening things up just allows you to fit better, get into a better position, and allows you to do some better deadlifts. So hopefully that helps, man.
So I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping actually, because we got an email. It was a bench press, but it was like a warm up. So it was like 6 reps, RPE 3 or 4. So first of all, if you're going to submit a lift, submit something that's like harder than that. Like what, RPE 7, 8?
I would be amazed if somebody could accurately rate an RPE 3 or 4. I don't think RPE really comes into play until 6. Because like, who can feel the difference between I could have done 7 more versus 6 more? Like, that's just a warm up.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. So don't send us warm ups unless they're like maybe like an opener or something, and you want us to look at your opener.
Yeah.
For a meet, maybe.
If it's a single like last warm up in the back room or something, but then just send me the opener or a second attempt or something.
Yeah. If you want good technique advice, you need to send us something that there is a little bit of form breakdown and that there's something there to actually critique. Number 2 is just give us a little bit of context in the email. A lot of you have been doing that, so that's great, especially in the more recent emails. But every so often I'll just get like no context, no nothing. It's just a lift. And so if you have sent something in without any kind of context, I just delete it. So just like...
Yeah, I was going to say, that's just not going to get chosen.
Just so you know, like if you're wondering why you're not picked, it's most likely because you sent us a warm-up, your form is literally nothing to critique, or you didn't give us context. Because like if someone's form is like perfect, sometimes I just kind of move on to someone who might need a little bit more help. Now, moving on, we have Thomas Sr. He is training for comp. This is 150 kilo squat, RPE 8. Arms are quite close to the shoulders, so the bar was a bit high. That's all we got. So
okay. So right off the hop here, you mentioned yourself that the arms were a little, your grip is very narrow. Probably widening that up, not only is it going to allow you to get the bar a little lower, it's going to allow you to be a little more active in your upper back. I think a lot of the times people crank their grip in really hard because it creates this kind of like false or passive tightness in the upper back because you're just kind of stuffing all the structures of your upper back together. However, sometimes it really prevents you from being able to pull that bar in and to find that lat tightness and to really create the tightness in the shelf where the bar is sitting that we're trying to create. So that's number 1. Probably look at widening your grip, finding somewhere where the bar is not going to creep up on you because of that. Number 2, big thing here is bracing. Thomas, the biggest thing we need to work on here is bracing. So on the descent, you actually look quite good. Things look solid all the way through. We get good depth, and then when we start to come back up, the first thing we do is we start to overextend, right? We start to drive the chest up. I think, fall forward a little bit in the bottom, which potentially a case for a heeled shoe there, something that allows you to get that depth without getting sort of popped forward in the bottom. But the bigger thing, like I said, is that we're really trying to reach the chest up as the first sort of action out of the hole. And what that's gonna do as this set goes on is this is gonna cause us to really slow down in that middle point of the lift, because we're gonna be focusing a lot more on back extension than we are on, you know, hip and knee extension. And the thing that we need to try to do is try to be patient out of the bottom. Now, because that bar is high or higher than maybe where you would normally put it, it might feel at, you know, an especially high risk of falling forward. And you can see here, you know, if we draw a straight line down, that bar is, you know, decently out in front of you. Now, we might not be straight on from the side, but my point still stands. And the way that you're trying to combat that is like, well, if I arch my back, it kind of pulls that bar back closer to that center of gravity. However, when we have to arch the bar back like that, like I said, we can't transfer force from the lower body through to the bar nearly as well. So what we want to do is we want to, you know, once we got the grip changed, we can probably get that bar a little lower. It's probably going to feel a little bit less like we're tipping forward. And then we want to try to maintain that kind of ribs down brace out of the bottom, right? We want to trust the trunk, trust the torso, trust your squat, and take a little bit of time coming up out of the bottom. Allow yourself to be in that kind of leaned position, right? If you look at how you have to position yourself on the way down, right? Like this is beautiful. That looks great. And then when we come up, right, we're pretty far forward and we're really, really arched, right? So we want to try to maintain the brace as we change directions. Now that might be, it might be that you're losing it during the transition from eccentric to concentric, from the way down to the way up. So in that case, we really want to try to focus on keeping that contraction and that brace very similar as you change directions. And it could be that you're good into the bottom and then you're losing it as you're coming up. Again, you know, in that case, we just need to focus on kind of a different timing with the brace. But the important thing is keeping that brace good and consistent. And, you know, it might be that this is more doable with a little bit lighter weights. I don't think this is like an overshot, or, you know, I wouldn't look at this and be like, oh, that's too much weight to be training with. Like that seems like a fine level of exertion for your general training. However, you know, I think the thing here is we want to use enough weight that we're going to get a training effect, but we also need to keep the weight limited enough that we can cultivate good technique on, you know, 80% or more of the weight of the training reps that we're doing. So it might be lightening the load, allows you to focus in on that kind of stuff, but number one thing here is going to be bracing. So just trying to get out of that habit and try to stay looking like this on the way up.
Next up, we got Nick Adne. So this is going to be a 187.5 kilo for 2 bench. It was a 3 rep max attempt, so it's RPE 10. So he competes December 9th. Bench has felt good until the last couple of weeks. Now it feels like he can't get into the right position. Should he adjust his bar path?
So number one, I don't know if I'd look at like bar path as something that you're really like trying to think of or adjust. You know what I mean? It's going to be more, you know, do I adjust positioning? Do I adjust my touch point? Adjusting the bar path, like, I mean, generally speaking, anytime you press, you should be trying to press back just a little bit off the chest, right? But the reasons the bar path goes wonky are often what we want to try to get into, more so than the outcome of the bar path getting wonky. And what we can see here on this final rep is that, you know, the bar kind of comes out this way, the shoulders, you know, lose a little bit of position, we get a little shrugged up. I think part of this is we're, you know, again, potentially over tucking here a little bit, right? Looks like maybe we're just leading a little bit much with the elbows there. It looks like our kind of leg drive and arch are going this way instead of this way. You know, I'd try to get a little more leg drive back, because as we go through the set, like we definitely flatten out a fair bit, right? You get the chest up really good for that rep. And then as you're doing the rep, we fall down a little bit more again. And then by the time we go for this last rep, we flatten right out, like mid rep. So shoulder, upper back tightness and position. The other thing is, and I mentioned this I think in the last video, but these wrist wraps are doing nothing for you right there. right? Again, we got wrist wraps, basically where my watch is. And, you know, obviously that's not gonna restrict or support the joint at all. You need that wrist wrap at least a little onto the butt of your palm there if you want it to actually provide you some support. So that's neither here nor there, just another kind of little tip. But yeah, I think the big thing is gonna be maintaining your upper back tension as you press, trying to, you know, the other thing is, I don't know if we're intentionally doing touch and go here, but a lot of what's happening, a lot of the positioning that we're losing is happening right there when we touch the chest, right? We're coming off the chest inconsistently. The shoulders are moving, you know, there's one rep, the second rep, the bar comes back really quick. The third rep, the bar goes out the other way. So I think practicing that touch and maintaining good tightness and tension as you change directions, which is often going to be a product of good paused training where you're focusing on being comfortable and consistent with the touch and how you're changing directions off the chest. Another thing is, and this might, you know, what am I trying to say here? This might sort of invalidate all of the advice that I gave you, is you might just be a little over fatigued, right? If you compete on the 9th, that's that's like 2 weeks away here?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think it's a good idea to be maxing out that close to a meet? I'm not sure how far out this was.
Yeah, this could have been a while back, but sometimes we go through these periods where we feel like we're not getting into a good position, or we feel like we're doing things differently or poorly. And the reasoning is, you know, something's changed in the training. So, you know, it could be that you swapped bench variations and maybe what you're doing now, maybe it's the touch and go, maybe whatever. Maybe it's not contributing as much as it was, you know. Maybe you had some upper back work in there that was helping a lot, or maybe you introduced some upper back work that's fatiguing your upper back and now you're not fresh for your bench sessions. So there are a lot of different things to look at when it comes to these kinds of scenarios. And a lot of it is well beyond the scope of what we can actually look at on the screen here in technique, right? It might be that, you know, we redlined a little bit too much on the bench intensity and you got to pull back so you can recover and, you know, start feeling better, or at least recovering, you know, to a sort of baseline between bench sessions. So yeah, a couple technique things there and a couple things again, you know, with programming and overall training that are definitely worth looking at and analyzing and thinking about.
All right, our final submission is Carlo Saleki. I did not look up how to say his last
I'm
name.
gonna guess that's like Italian, and
Yep.
it's Salsecchi,
Oh, you are correct, yes.
maybe?
So this is 160 kilos for 5 reps, RP 8. Powerlifting since 2020 and planning on doing Italian Nats in May. So
there you
yes, Italian. Worried about excessive butt wink. How much is too much? Is there an acceptable amount? Should he worry about it? He's tried 1/2-inch heel all the way up to a 1-inch heel, but nothing feels as good as flat shoes.
All right. And you know what we do with the last submission? I'm ready. I've got some good advice, I think, for this gentleman here. But we're going to leave you on a cliffhanger. Go down into the comments section below. Let us know what you think Carlo could fix or work on. You know, give your advice and encouragement down there to Carlo. And I will be starting next Form Check Friday with Carlo's lift. And if you like content like this, make sure to come by our live stream every Friday, the day this goes live. If you can't get enough Form Check Friday, come for it live. Watch it recorded on the YouTube. Get your full dose of Form Check Friday, and we'll see you then in the next one.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.